How has your day been today so far?
Good.
Good. Great. So hopefully you'll have a little bit to reflect on. And I was actually sort of thinking right before I started the session, you know, my day, I wake up sort of late, as my mom will complain about. So I woke up kind of recently, so I don't have a whole lot to from my day to, you know, reflect on right now. But you guys, maybe some things are happening to you that, if you're so interested, you can write about in poetry. But I'm not going to force you. Today we're going to be talking about Reflective Poetry 101, and so pretty much reflective poetry, or my definition of it, is pretty broad. It's essentially when you're reflecting on issues or reflecting on things that are happening and writing about in poetry. So it could be rhyming, non-rhyming, it could be organized in a specific way, it could be a haiku, whatever type of poetry it is, it's reflective as long as you are reflecting on something and working with that reflection to make it into art. So first, if you're wondering if a 13-year-old is talking about this, I wanted to introduce myself. My name's Adora Skitalk, and when I was 7 I published my first book. It's called Flying Fingers, and more recently I published my second book called Dancing Fingers, which is a book of poetry that I co-authored with my older sister. So I really love to write poetry, and it's something that I do pretty frequently, and I'm hoping to write another poetry book as well. Now, have you guys read any poetry, or do you have some favorite poets?
Sherlock. Sherlock Holmes is not a poet. Yeah. We like Shel Silverstein. They check out that book a lot.
Shel Silverstein. Oh yeah, one of my favorite poets. Actually, when you said Sherlock Holmes, I was sort of thinking, does he mean Shel Silverstein? But it was sort of a, I guess their names sort of sound alike. So yeah, Shel Silverstein is a really great poet. He's written a lot of books too. So that's another thing, is that you can find a lot of his work. Do you know of any other poets?
Robert Frost.
Robert Frost, yeah, another very famous one. Anyone else? I'm sorry?
Edgar Allan Poe.
Edgar Allan Poe. Okay. Great. Well, it sounds like you guys have read some quite a bit of poetry then before, and you've probably come across it in literature, and even when you're reading outside of school, you'll find poetry. Raise your hand if you ever listen to music. I'm seeing a lot of raised hands. Okay. Raise your hand if you if that music is usually music with lyrics. Okay, I'm seeing a lot of raised hands. So then you guys listen to poetry on a very regular basis, because even if some people would disagree that certain lyrics are art, and I know I'll probably offend a lot of Justin Bieber fans, but I'm sorry. I'm still arguing with my sister over Baby. But anyway, you listen to art and poetry on a pretty daily basis if you listen to music. So poetry is all around us. But let's talk about a little more about reflective poetry. What do you guys think reflective poetry is?
Speak up,
Where you reflect on something in your life, in your writing.
Yep, where you reflect on something in your life in writing. For instance, if you really love Justin Bieber and you were very offended by my reference just then, you might reflect on that in a poem in which you divulged your deepest feelings about this issue. Maybe you might have a very heartfelt poem right there. So when you write reflective poetry, then you are sticking to this basic idea about poetry, and that's that it allows us to express our feelings and opinions. So what are some feelings you felt this week? Any feelings you felt this week?
Does anybody have any feelings this week?
I don't. Please make a list of at least 3 feelings you have in your notebook and write them down. 3 feelings you might be having at the moment, or you might have had earlier this week, or yesterday. Do any of you have frustration?
Yeah.
Are any of you feeling a little stressed with all the work we piled on you this week?
Somewhat.
So use those. Yeah.
We need more.
Oh, yeah. These three. What's that? Felix. You're good on Felix. Yeah.
Is anyone, raise your hand once you're finished writing down your. Great. So you've probably felt a whole range of feelings, whether it's frustrated, stressed out, exuberant, you know, whatever you felt and whatever reasons you felt that way, you can turn that all into poetry. So I want to ask you another question. What are some of the, when you're talking with friends, do you ever talk about, and I know that this might sound a little weird, because how many of you get your friends to hang out and you're like, let's talk about news issues, and let's talk about what's going on in Libya or something like that. That might not happen every day, but what are some of the kind of big issues that occasionally come up when you're talking with your friends?
Dirt bikes.
Okay, dirt bikes, that's a big issue. Anything else? What? Sports, okay, sports. Anything else? You know, weather, current events.
Snow. Snow. Too much snow.
Okay, and is there one more thing you discuss with your friends a lot? I'm sorry?
Patrick. Poetry. People.
Poetry? People? Okay.
People.
Great. So you can have opinions on really big topics like war and peace. You know, you might not talk with your friends about those things every day, but you probably still have opinions. Or you can have opinions on small topics like the color of a flower and reflect on the color of a flower and how magnificent and beautiful it is. And a lot of poets, even though that sounds sort of weird to be thinking about a flower and saying, you know, I really love this flower and look how it reflects off the sun and I'm going to go reflect on that. A lot of poets do that and their poems end up in literature textbooks. So you can reflect on huge topics, you can reflect on tiny topics. Whatever you do, your poems reflect the world that you live in. So what kind of world do we live in? Let's get one. It's a little hard to hear you talk at once.
What kind of world do you guys live in? Describe it to Adora. She's never been here. Katie.
A complicated world.
A complicated world. Yeah, we live in a very complicated world. So what makes it complicated? Why is our world so complicated?
Because everybody, there's like tons of war and like there's tons of fighting.
Yeah,
tons of great stuff.
Yeah, tons of not great stuff going on. You know, there's conflict, there's war, there's around now there's been protests in a lot of the Middle East, people rising up against dictators. What are some other details about the kind of world that we live in? It's complicated. There's bad things happening. Are there some good things happening? Are there some things you're not sure about? Who else would like to provide other details?
Wes, can you give a description of the world you live in right here?
Unnatural causes of unfortunate events.
Okay. Unfortunate events?
Unfortunate events. Great.
And you for an example?
Like, some animals here kill and some animals here get hunted. It's just the way of life, I guess.
Okay, so sort of.
We got wolves and elk and wolves eat the elk.
And that would actually make a really good poem. Is you could write about like the coexistence of animals and humans as kind of, you know, there's tension or something. You could write about that. Maybe that would make a really interesting reflection. What you just had to say. What are some other details you can provide? What kind of world do we live in?
Rohan, how about you? What kind of world are you living in here?
There's a lot of competition for like whatever you do. It's always like
Yeah, like
Trying to be good at prison.
a lot of competition, and it really comes through in everything because, you know, when you listen, if any of you listen to the President's State of the Union speech, then you would have heard like over and over again it was, you know, we need to beat China, we need to beat all these countries because it's a race. That was sort of like and that's the analogy that everyone's been using, is that it's a race or it's a competition and we're competing. It seems like pretty much we're competing against everybody else. So yeah, it is a lot of competitiveness, not just in school, but also in sports and even in the way that we look at education and industry. It's being competitive with the rest of the world. So yeah, that could be a little stressful at times too. What else? What's one more detail?
Cherie, how about you?
Well, Cherie.
Stephanie's got one. Steph, go ahead.
We live in a cold world.
You do. How do you know?
Very cold.
The weather is cold. Very fantastic.
Describe it, Steph.
Like, it's really cold here and it never changes.
Okay.
Summer, really beautiful.
So this would be
It's cold for me. It's too cold for me.
this would be very specific. Yes. And I was about to say, you know, have you ever been to Hawaii? Maybe you would change your opinion of the world being cold, but I didn't want to rub it in too much. Okay. So it's always cold where you are. That's the.
Usually not.
Okay.
Last summer. It's snowing in January.
So it sometimes heats up a little bit. Okay, so yeah, your area is very cold. So yeah, when we think about the kind of world that we live in, then we get all these really good ideas. The world is complicated. The world is competitive. The specific place that we live in is really cold. So let me make sure I know your city and I'm pronouncing it right. It's Du Bois or Du Bois. Okay, good. I wasn't, you know, I'm studying French, and so suddenly all these American names that we sort of like, I don't know, taken from the French, just like sound really wrong to me the way that they're pronounced. But they sound wrong to me when I try to pronounce them in French. So, okay, moving on. Tip number 1 is use poems to reflect on ideas. So the types of ideas that we had about the world being complicated, about conflict. And you don't even necessarily need to understand the idea to great depth. You don't need to know everything about the issue that you're going to be writing about in order to write about it, because poetry is a good way to explore something that you're not quite sure. You can use it as an excuse to research and learn more. So, for instance, this is a poem that I wrote actually quite a long time ago called A Long Stare. And I wrote this, I think, maybe like 2 years ago. Yeah. And so it's basically all my questions about, you know, what's going to happen in a million years or a really long time. What will happen when the fields are gone and damp is the desert expanse? Will barrenness adorn the dawn and silence fill our dance? Will the earth be lit by darkness and tabled by years of dust? Is civilization's road of starkness? What crystal ball is just? Will wings yet touch the clouds? Will hope rise to the sky? Will despair slip out from shroud as time goes passing by? So that's a poem that I wrote, and it was just, you know, obviously I can't see ahead and say, oh yeah, sure, we'll be around in our present life form exactly the same, continuing, and we'll have no problems whatsoever a million years from now. You know, I can't say anything like that for sure, so instead I wrote a poem about it, asking questions. And so when you write reflective poetry, a very effective thing to do is ask questions. So what are questions you guys have? What are things you don't know for sure? It could be your immediate future. It could even be who's going to win the football game or something like that. Although you might have a kind of better idea of that. You can ask questions like what will happen to humans a million years from now. You could ask questions about what's going to happen in the Middle East. What are questions that you have about your world?
Nancy, what's a question you have? Okay.
$1,000 cold.
Megan, what's a question you have?
What will happen at the wolf debate?
What will happen in the, sorry?
Wolf debate.
Wolf debate. Okay, so like about hunting wolves, not hunting wolves. Yeah. Okay, what else?
Jocelyn, a question you might have.
I don't know.
Katie, question you have.
Oh, what will happen to our after that?
And sorry?
Like what will happen tomorrow and like.
Yeah, what will happen tomorrow? What will happen in the future?
Yeah.
That's actually, when you read poems and stuff, or when people talk about, and actually I use this phrase a lot about, we're going to be the leaders of tomorrow, and obviously, the people don't necessarily mean tomorrow, but that tomorrow is used to represent the future. So it would be interesting to see you writing a poem about tomorrow and using it both kind of in its literal sense as well as in its figurative sense as a bigger picture kind of thing. If you wanted to actually write literally about what's going to happen the day after this, you might even want to say what's going to happen tomorrow and what's going to happen the day after that, and that would be sort of fun. So, any other questions you have? You don't know everything, I'm assuming.
I don't think they know everything. I do. Another question? Thank God.
How will the dip diffuse and like how everything will be going?
Right. What's going on in the Middle East and who's going to take control? Will it be a democratic government? Will another dictator come to power? Will it be peaceful? Will it be violent? We see Egypt, it was relatively peaceful, and Tunisia relatively peaceful versus now Libya, which is just, there's bombing going on and the person in charge is completely denying that there's any protests going on. So yeah, there's definitely a marked difference there. What are other questions that we might have? Let's go with one more.
Great news. What do you guys wonder about? What do you think, Matt? You're not sure? David, did you have a question? Yeah. Tommy, you guys are so quiet. They're never this quiet.
I know, and I know the part is, when you think about reflective poetry, maybe you think of being really quiet and kind of, being with your mind. But since this is a session about reflective poetry, it's really helpful if you actually speak up. When you're at home and you're just, reflecting, you can be as quiet as you want. But one more question.
Go ahead, Katie.
Sometimes people wonder about what would have happened if they did something else, like if they changed one of their actions.
Yeah.
What could have happened?
That's a really good one. And throughout history, there's all those, what if moments. What if Napoleon hadn't lost at Waterloo? What if, I'm actually doing this history project about Neville Chamberlain, the British Prime Minister who was famous, unfortunately, for appeasing, or basically he was doing diplomacy with Adolf Hitler. And there are a lot of questions, what if he hadn't sort of given in to Hitler's specific request? Then there's questions even more recent, what if we hadn't gone into Iraq or Afghanistan, questions like that still have implications for today. So all these what if questions make really good reflective poetry. So activity number 1, we're going to do this together, is to write a poem inspired by one of the following ideas. So you don't have to answer any questions, quote it, write about it directly. Just look at the quotation and write wherever it leads you. It could even be one word out of the quotation makes you think of something totally different. That's okay. So this is one of the quotes, Albert Einstein. Imagination is more important than knowledge, for knowledge is limited to all we now know and understand, while imagination embraces the entire world and all there ever will be to know and understand. Einstein. Plato. Plato was this is not the ball of dough, as you probably realize. This is the philosopher. It is a common saying and in everybody's mouth that life is but a sojourn. Everyone know what sojourn means? It's sort of weird, but not used too much.
Like a journey, the journey.
Yeah, exactly. And William Shakespeare. There are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy. Shakespeare. And that's from a play called Hamlet, which you may have heard of. And Eleanor Roosevelt. I think that somehow we learn who we really are and then live with that decision. And Confucius. I want you to be everything that's you deep at the center of your being. So we have Confucius, being everything that's you. Eleanor Roosevelt, learning who we really are. William Shakespeare, there's more things in heaven and earth than you can dream of. Or Plato, it's a common saying that life is but a sojourn or journey. Or Albert Einstein, imagination is more important than knowledge, for knowledge is limited to all we know, and imagination is all we ever will know and understand. So, let's pick one of these quotes. Raise your hand for Einstein. Okay, well, raise your hand for Plato. Raise your hand for Shakespeare. Raise your hand for Roosevelt. Raise your hand for Confucius. Okay, so it looks like Albert Einstein is the definite winner then. So quickly, that's about right. Imagination is more important than knowledge, for knowledge is limited to all we now know and understand, while imagination embraces the entire world and all there ever will be to know and understand. So what do you think about this quote?
Let's write it down first. Imagination is more important than knowledge. Pretty kind of at the probably top of a page so that you have room. Imagination is more important than knowledge. While they're writing that down, some of them were curious if you are doing a project for National History Day, because the 8th graders are.
Oh yeah, actually that's exactly what I'm doing. Yep, National History Day, and that's my project. And I thought it was super. I thought it was a super unique topic, and like that I was the only one who would be thinking about Neville Chamberlain. But then I realized it was on the top of the list of sample topics. So yeah, I guess mine is a little bit ordinary. But then again, everyone else that I know is doing Nixon's visit to China. So.
Oh, that would be West's Nixon ping pong diplomacy.
Yeah, there's a lot of really good sample examples for the topic. So glad to hear some of you guys are doing it. It's a fun contest. So who knows? Maybe if my documentary is really good, which I'm hopefully working on, maybe I'll see you at Nationals.
Megan, raise your hand. Megan was at Nationals last year with a paper on DNA.
Oh wow, that's amazing. I wasn't even like entering this contest. I wasn't even thinking, I'll make it to Nationals, because I just know so many amazing people who have, either written papers or made really engaging documentaries. And I was actually just yesterday looking at all the examples of former winners, and I was just thinking, I would be really, really lucky to be able to get up that high. So congratulations, that's amazing. Is everyone finished writing this down?
No.
Okay, well if you can, for those of you who are done, which I know is probably a couple, then why don't we start talking about, what do you think about this quote? Do you agree with it? Do you disagree with it?
Agree.
Agree. Okay. And so when he says that imagination is more important than knowledge, are there any ways that you see that like happening in your own life, where you've used imagination more than you've used knowledge, or vice versa, where you've used knowledge more than you've used imagination?
Megan, you had a thought. Where you said you mostly agreed with it, right?
Well, there's also they had different opinions in the past, but it's mostly looking to the future. So I think it's kind of true, but it also looks to the past.
Yeah. Do you guys think that opinions are shifting, that people are taking more of Einstein's approach and imagination is becoming more important? Or that people see it as more important? Yeah. And I know that, I go to some education conferences sometimes, and a lot of the talk is about how can we get kids to use higher order thinking skills? How can we get students to be using their imagination and their creativity? And a lot of focus is on that now, whereas it might have used to be more of how can we get students to know all this core information and to, and that's still a big part of these conferences, talking about how can we get students to know more stuff, but a lot of it is also now more about imagination and creativity. So there is somewhat of an attitude shift. Now reflecting on this, what are some of the immediate thoughts that come to your mind?
comes to your mind when you see that quote? What was that for, please? Or for Dora, actually. For her. You know, something that comes to mind.
Like for me, when I look at this quote, I sort of imagine knowledge. I almost imagine sort of circles like around me. Like knowledge is this, and imagination is just like that. And you guys might even think of some other kind of visual thing, but I sort of imagine knowledge as being a very solid kind of circle, and this all is very like, you know, in my head, but I almost imagine it as being a very solid circle, and it's right here, and people are adding a little bit to it. And then imagination is just sort of like extends out in all directions, and it's sort of transparent and multi-layered. So, you know, I think of a picture sort of like that. But why don't we brainstorm ideas for a poem? So we're going to be writing a poem reflecting on this. So what's a thought that we should be using? How should we base our poem on this?
Brian? What'd you say? You like that word, imagination? Yes. When you think of... Rowan, you're thinking. Show us.
Yes, sing your song for us.
Kurt, go ahead.
Imagination, and compare that, like compare what we can dream up to the stuff that we know.
Okay, sure, that's a great idea. We're gonna kind of compare the stuff that we can imagine, and I'm gonna sit down here to start typing. We're gonna compare the stuff that we can imagine to what we know. And so let me just make the font a little bigger. Okay, and you can start writing. So we're going to be sort of comparing, or almost going to be comparing and contrasting in a way, like with what we know and what we can imagine. So what should we start with? What we know or what we can imagine?
What we can imagine.
What we could imagine.
What we know.
Now, so for those of you who say we should start with what we know, you know, what's your rationale behind that? Are you just like randomly saying we should start with what we know, or are you thinking, okay, maybe this would be a better setup, as in it would provide a, I don't know, more of a contrast, like what we know, and then suddenly it becomes more expansive with imagination? Or for those of you who are saying we should start with imagination, is it because you think we should, you know, start kind of broad and then zero in on knowledge? I'm like, basically, which one, because I've heard both, which one do you think would be better?
Jocelyn, would you go? Big boy.
I think we should start with what we don't know, and then go into
Imagination.
Okay, that's a good idea, right? About what we don't know. So what are some things we don't know? What are some mysteries? We talked about some of the things we don't know, but what are some other things we don't know?
Write down the word mysteries, you guys. See if you can think of a mystery. Jocelyn started a poem about stars. Or was it you, Steph, that did the stars? She started about stars. And did you start with imagination or what you knew?
I started with what I knew.
If you start with what you know, it's like you can add imagination to it.
Yes, that's a good one. Okay, so what we're going to do here, I think, is that we're going to start with maybe a couple of things that we. So a couple of things that we know, or a couple of things that we don't know, a couple of things that we know, and then what we can imagine. Is that like the structure of the poem that we should do?
Yeah.
Okay, so why don't we just, you know, start writing, and we'll see, and hopefully, you know, something I found is sometimes it can start out a little bit, you know, sort of feeling your way around it, but then it generally gets better. So we'll start with what we don't know. So we don't know what will happen tomorrow. We don't know what else.
The plot we're lost in sorrow.
Okay.
I don't know.
Whether the plot of our story is sorrow. Because you know when. Okay, so we're kind of if we're going to do a rhyme home here. Also, another thing to consider is how the syllables sound. So let's see. We don't know what will happen tomorrow. We don't know if the plot of our story is sorrow. That sounds okay. Okay, what else? One more thing we don't know.
Hey, what don't you know? Steph, what don't you know? You've always got your eye.
Yes.
I'm not gonna say that.
Holder? Roman? What don't you know?
Got no idea.
Throw something out there, please.
Oh,
Talk to her.
I don't know what to say. Dinosaur.
Okay, can we have one person?
Holder says he doesn't know what to say.
Okay. All right. How about this? Quickly turn to the person next. Oh, that won't quite work. Sorry, because there's a couple of you on the ends here. Okay. We don't know what will happen tomorrow. We don't know if the plot of our story is sorrow. We can zoom in a little bit. We don't have to be this giant, broad, we don't know what will happen in the future kind of view. We can take a closer view. Okay. We don't know what jobs we're going to, maybe we don't know what kind of job we'll hold or something. That's a little bit specific, but you know, you could do something like that. What do you not know about yourself or about your life?
Guys? You don't know what you're doing. Jot something down. Everybody jot something down you don't know. Okay? Jot something down. I don't know something. Try it that way so you can get your brains going. I don't know something. Take you to be turning around this way. I don't know if I spelled that right. Let's check this. Right. We got something? Yep.
About success. We don't know what our success will be.
Success. Okay, great. That's a perfect one. It's kind of like the, you know, we don't know what kind of job we'll hold, only it's a broader way of saying it. Okay. We don't know what maybe we don't know where our success will lie. We don't know. Okay, one more thing that rhymes with lie. Yeah, that would be a seriously reflective poem if I wrote, we don't know if we're going to eat pie. I mean, it would really fit with that. Okay. So something that you genuinely, maybe even something that you've already written down, but that you could phrase in a way that would rhyme with lie. Or it doesn't have to. We can stop rhyming with this last line.
We don't know what's going to be beyond the sky.
We don't know much about, well, see, I'm thinking we sort of do know that we have gone to the moon. We don't know,
what will fly in the sky?
We don't know what will fly in the sky, okay? So sort of indicating, you know, either in the future or even today, we don't quite know what the innovations or inventions will be. Okay. Oh, but this would be perfect, and this is a perfect way to then transition into what we can imagine, because we can imagine what will fly in the sky, right? So how should we kind of phase into what we can imagine?
Achievement.
But with our imagination, we have vision. We see Okay, so take one of these questions. Either we don't know what will fly in the sky, we don't know where our success will lie, we don't know if the plot of our story is sorrow, or we don't know what will happen tomorrow, and answer it with your imagination. I'm not going to take you up on how accurate or how likely it is.
We could like go from the beginning again and say what we imagine about what we don't know what will happen tomorrow.
Okay, we see what, okay, so what will happen tomorrow? Like literally answer that.
She'll get covered. School shoes.
What do you know about it?
They have cars and bridges competition tomorrow.
We see, so when you think of the future, when you think of a futuristic world, like, what do you think of? What's different?
The weather.
I'm sorry.
That is what we
Okay, let's get one person. Answer the question. What is the futuristic world looking like? So,
flying car.
Say it. Go ahead, ask it again.
sure. What does the futuristic world look like? What is the world of the future going to look like? Use your imagination to answer that.
Flying cars.
Imaginative world.
Okay.
Flying cars.
We see flying cars and unicorns. Okay. It can be that crazy because again we're not. I know that we kind of just, you might say, okay, we just like really messed up there, but you could argue, you know, this is a really messed up poem, and you know, flying cars and unicorns, that just doesn't sound deep at all. But this is the thing, though, you don't start a poem and say, I'm going to write something really deep and you know, with astounding ideas. You say, you know, I'm going to write a poem reflecting. And what we've done here is we've talked about the future. We don't know about it, but with our imagination we can see. And